do is we are now going to make an HDR using one exposure. Sometimes you want the HDR effect, that opening of the shadows, that deepening of the highlights, and a truer version of what you saw, but you don't have 3 exposures. And you can do this using one exposure and 9 easy steps. You ready? Let's open this in Camera Raw by right-clicking, opening Camera Raw, or using this little icon here, opening Camera Raw. And I'm going to turn off my shadow highlight warnings. I can see by looking at my histogram that I have a lot of shadow areas, very, very dark darks. And I have almost no highlights, no whites, and almost no highlights. So the first thing I'm going to do is drag the highlights all the way to the left. Push it way left. All right. Way left. Move the shadows all the way to the right, or when you think it looks good. You can see we are making some pretty big changes to the image. You might not want to go all the way. You can be a little cautious if you choose. Then we're going to move the black slider to the point where the photo doesn't look washed out. If we move it this way, it looks more washed out. So I'm going to drag it to the left. And what that's doing is giving us some contrast back. But if you look in this area in particular, this is the before and this is the after. And I'm using P, the shortcut P, for preview. Now I'm going to increase the clarity. Okay. And then I'm going to increase the vibrance. And the vibrance only affects certain colors. Saturation, yeah. In this case, because those are the secondary colors, it's not going to affect the greens and the as much as, say, the purples and the oranges. All right. So this is a gigantic difference. Oh, yeah. And again, I'm going a little bit on the excessive side because it's a demo. Good. Now I'm going to go to the effects, the FX. These are all little tabs. If I go to FX, I can increase the vignetting. So right now we don't have a vignette. I'm going to put a little bit of a vignette on it. This is too much when you can tell it's been done. So we just kind of want to darken the corners. And the last thing I like to do is use the targeted adjustment brush, or the K tool as I call it, and that lets you affect particular parts of the image only. When you are not using this tool, the adjustment brush, these are global effects. If I adjust the exposure, it adjusts exposure for everything. But if I want to just affect parts of the image, I can hit K, and I go into a little submenu. And in that submenu, I'm going to soften the brush a lot, and I'm going to bring it over the edges, just kind of painting along the edges.
So because you moved the clarity first and then brushed, it's affecting the clarity where you hit?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. And you can also live update. So right now, I think it's thinking.
Amy, I have a question.
Uh-huh.
About the vignette, is it always in the black dark tones, or is it like does it always fade with black? Or like, let's say you're outside like at the beach, wouldn't it be better to maybe have like a softer like white, like brighter tone?
We've got to think about your corners. If you use a white, your eyes are going to be attracted to those corners. Especially when I'm outside, I will use a slight little vignette just to darken the corners in. Okay. To keep the eye
so most of the time you just always
inside the frame. Yeah. Let me show you another thing that I do. And I manually add a vignette. This pin, now, if I hit K to go back in, computers. Oh, it's like, look at these numbers. It's not a great sign. Okay. Okay, go back in, select this pin, and that pin is showing you what is affected. At any point with this pin selected, I can adjust on the fly, and it will live update. So I could, if I wanted to go crazy, grab my exposure, dragging it to the right. It's not going to the right. That's cool. You can see what I want, as long as you can see what I want to see, that you can update any of these. And you can also drag them back down. All If you do not want to use the vignette, you could also make a brush in here, make a new brush, take the exposure down, and you could manually darken the corners in here. Make sure you have a nice, big, soft brush. I like to keep the flow and the density not 100%. That way I can build up my effect. And what it'll do is make another pin, and when you hover over that pin or select it, it will show you what areas are affected. Not in this case,
Any second now.
but yeah, it should.
Just teasing you.
There it goes. That's my manual vignette. So if I wanted to get rid of this guy over here, I need to select it, which is not letting me do. Man, you guys better watch these with the lights on. These are terrifying videos.
What
Okay.
kind of plant is that? Agave? Or what is that?
It's a succulent,
Yeah.
but I don't know exactly what kind.
Aloe
But
vera?
maybe.
It looks
Same
like
family?
a type of aloe vera plant.
I selected that other pin and deleted it just by hitting delete. So now I just have the effect from this one pin. And again, I can update that. But that's how I create a vignette. I will often just go in and do the corners myself. That way it's not uniform
Okay.
and it doesn't too extreme. And then when you're hit done, and you've got an exposure on HDR on one exposure, if you want to open that in Photoshop, like if you needed to do retouching, what do you hold down so that you can go back and change your mind? Shift. Open object. Opens as a smart object. And then you can save it. Save as a PSD. You will have to save it as a PSD because that smart object counts as a layer. Right? Not as a flat. It's not flat like a flat background. It's an counts as not being flat. All right? All right.